So this guy, a long time ago in the days of kings and castles, moved to a new city, town, kingdom. He comes walking into town and he sees nailed on this tree of one of these proclamations. And it's pretty faded and worn, but it says that whoever can jump to the top of the castle gets to marry the princess and will eventually become the new king. And he thought, what kind of a town am I moving into, right? And he sees this commoner there, and he says, what's the deal with this proclamation? And the guy says, oh yeah, that's for real. The king has one daughter, and he is protective of his daughter, wouldn't let her date and stuff. And so finally she and the queen pestered him enough where they talked him into a deal. And he said, the man who is good enough to marry my daughter and become the queen has to be able to jump to the top of the castle. And so it's not much of a deal, but that's the only deal the queen and princess got. So it used to be that we would all gather at the castle on Saturday mornings, and guys would try to use a catapult or a trampoline, or have their friends throw them up as high as they could. But now everybody, all the eligible bachelors, have broken bones or have given up, and so it's that's where things stand. And the guy thought, this is a strange town, right? But a couple days later, he got an idea, and he starts telling everybody, Saturday morning at the castle, 8 o'clock. They were very glad because they didn't have DVRs and stuff and no entertainment. And so they all gathered Saturday morning. They've got their blankets and apples and picnic baskets and stuff. And the king and the princess are up there on top of the castle. Don't know where the queen was. Maybe she was in the castle chapel praying, And so the king at 8 o'clock, looks at his sundial watch and tells the guy, it's time. So he walks over to the castle, and everybody's like looking at each other like, this guy doesn't have a trampoline or a catapult or any friends. Is he a little bit slow, or what's the deal? And but they watched as he went over to the castle, and there was a stairway just inside the gate, and he starts jumping on the steps, jumps on the first step, jumps up to the second step, jumps up to the third step. And people are really perplexed, but then somebody groans and says, oh, he's jumping to the top of the castle. Well, that doesn't count. You have to do it in one jump, and they start booing him and hollering and calling him names and stuff. Guy just ignores them, keeps jumping. Jump, jump. People, some people are yelling at him and throwing apple cores, and other people are picking up their blankets and starting to walk off until they realize the king is still watching. And he's just got his arms folded. He's scratching his beard, and he's just watching. And the princess is looking at her dad like, come on, Daddy, what are you thinking? And the king just watches this guy jump, jump, jump. After a while, he's dripping sweat. He's obviously in pain. And people are still calling him names, but he's just ignoring it, and he just keeps jumping. By the time he gets to the top, he can hardly jump at all. He's like half crawling, but he's still jumping up. Gets to the top out of breath, and the king's looking at him, and he smiles. And of course, what the king's thinking is, someday I do want grandchildren, right? And I'm not going to live forever. We do need to train a new king here. So he steps up to the edge of the castle, those little notches in the side of the castle tower, and he shouts to all the people down below, I never said you had to do it in one jump. And the king explained to his wife, this guy's not afraid to try something new. He ignored when everybody else was shouting him down. And when you're a king, you have to be able to ignore people because you can't make everybody happy, right? And he just kept jumping. He didn't give up. He knew how to ignore the naysayers and heed not the people that were criticizing him. So what does this have to do with looking for work? Well, obviously, when COVID-19 is going around and it's hard looking for work, it has everything to do with looking for work. But even when the economy is good, you have to know what you want, and you have to start, and you have to keep going, even when there are naysayers shouting you down. because there are always naysayers, and you have to be able to ignore them and just keep jumping. I have 4 daughters, and once I was working around the house, and my youngest daughter, she was about 7, came up to me and said, "Dad, I've been thinking." And I was busy, but I could tell this really meant something to her. It's just, this was deep for her. And so I forced myself to stop, and I said, "Yes?" And she said, "If people really want something, they shouldn't give up. Because if they give up, they'll never get it. But if they don't give up, eventually they'll get it. So people shouldn't give up." And I thought, hold that right there. Let me go get a piece of paper and a pencil. And I went and got it, and I wrote it down, and I use it in my presentations all the time now. Because that's so true. If we give up, we're never going to get what we want. But if we don't give up, maybe we need to take a rest. So take a rest if you must, but don't you quit. Keep going. As long as you keep going, you'll meet people, you'll find ways to take another step, and another step, and another step. I went to a museum in Council Bluffs, Iowa, Pioneer Museum, and it documents people that were too poor to have a wagon, and so they got half a wagon that they pulled by themselves. Little lightweight box, 2 big wheels, crossbar that they would pull by themselves through the streams and rivers and snow and over the mountains. And they started from Council Bluffs, went clear across Iowa, Wyoming, and up over the mountains and down into Salt Lake Valley in Utah. Walked all the way. Even little kids walked. They couldn't carry them in the hand carts. That was just for like food and clothing and stuff. And even the little kids made it walking as long as they didn't quit. They would stop and rest on Sundays, but they would keep going. And that's an awesome example of, if you don't quit, eventually you'll get there. I went to a graduation ceremony a while ago, and there was this giant guy from the islands. I don't know if he was Samoan or Tongan, but he's just giant of a guy. And he wasn't just giant outside, he was big inside too. And he gave the graduation talk. And he said, "My football coach, when we're lifting weights, walks around the gym and says to us, 'Guys, if you want something,'" how did he say it here? "If you want something, you gotta keep going. You gotta see it through. You gotta do things you don't want to do." Isn't that awesome? If you want something, you gotta keep going. You gotta see it through. You gotta do things you don't want to do. And maybe you don't want to fill out another resume or another application, but if it isn't neat and complete, you're telling employers that you really don't want that job, and that if they hire you, your work's not going to be very good. So you got to make it neat and complete. You got to keep looking at those job postings. We got to apply. We've got to read boring articles about how to interview and how to prepare. We've got to do our part. We got to keep going. We got to see it through, or else we're not going to get to the top of the castle, and we're not going to get what we want. So take a rest if you must, but don't you quit. Now, who might you share this with that it would help? Thanks for watching.